So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Elise Shane, who's going to introduce herself and talk about today.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Well, I can be loud. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. We're excited to bring you a topic that you all actually requested. So after each Leadership Oasis, we send out a survey and we ask what topics would be meaningful to you. And one of the topics that came up with practical applications for developing and growing equity in the workplace. And so we are thrilled to bring to you, and I call her the infamous Casey Coker. She's also a friend, and I've met lots of people committed, talented, qualified, and competent in this work. And I'm telling you, I still have not met anyone as qualified and can speak so eloquently about how we really do this work. And so we're really excited to bring Casey here today. She's amazing, and she used to work for HealthNet actually, and also for Bronson's Community Health Equity and Inclusion. And as you can tell, she can't get rid of us. Bringing her back again. Some of you have probably heard her speak before. We will be, we're attempting to record this today, and so we welcome you to ask your questions, and if there's a question that you'd not like to be recorded, we will make sure to have time at the end when we stop the recording for you to ask Casey questions today. It's just audio, no video, so the camera won't be on you, but I would like to introduce Ms. Casey Coker. Thank you.
I think this might not be working, right?
I think the battery's dying.
Oh, no. Okay.
It worked for a bit.
Wait, okay. Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? All right, even folks in the back. All right, if there's ever a point where you can't just like wave, but I will use my projection voice. So my name's Casey. I'm a psychotherapist by training, and I've been a psychotherapist for almost 20 years now. So like, feels like a minute. I have my own I work in a private practice, so still hang out with Bronson folks, love them dearly, and I very much appreciate being able to spend time with all of you today. So again, if there are any questions, thoughts, ideas, concerns, frustrations throughout the presentation, I know we're recording the audio, so some people can be a little hesitant about bringing that up. We will pause, we'll stop the audio at the end, and I welcome and invite any questions or conversation. I will have my email address if you have questions that you want to ask that way at the end as well. So I invite you to just take a moment. The last 3 years have been pretty traumatic. And so really just finding some comfort in your body, rolling your shoulders, relaxing your jaw, just any sort of deep breath that you can. And this brings us into the moment. So it's really hard to be in a presentation and pay attention to the content and think about the content if we're thinking about the next email we have to send or where we have to be after this and our mind is wandering. So inviting you to kind of bring yourself present into the moment. Also, one of the magic tricks of breathing that can bring us out of fight or flight, where we spend a lot of time, is if we breathe in and out through the nose, that activates this other process called rest and digest. So we have this part of us where we're fight or flight and we're running around and we're trying to do everything with deadlines and to-do lists. And by breathing slowly in and out of our nose, we can activate that rest and digest, which gives our body a little bit of the break from the stress. If you have like an obstruction or you're congested, breathing in and out of your mouth like you're breathing out of a straw can also kind of help slow your nervous system. We got it back in business?
We got it back in
You're the
business.
best.
Thank you.
You're the best. All right, and I also, can you hear me? All right, so on another note, today is the National Day of Racial Healing. So sometimes when we do culture presentations, culture can be synonymous, we think, with race, and that's not what's happening here today. So I wanted to make sure that we're differentiating the two. The way the conversation is going to go today is culture in the most expansive sense of the word culture. So it includes race, but isn't limited to that conversation. But there are some really beautiful events happening where I live in Kalamazoo at the State Theater. The National Day of Racial Healing. There's a beautiful event tonight. I invite you to attend. A lot of my friends and colleagues will be there. I also want to lift up that Dr. Johnson recently wrote an entire book. So I think we should try our best to get her on the bestseller list. So I ordered a hard copy, because we need her to sign the copy, right? Someone writes a book. And so it's about therapy in the Black population, Black culture, and I think that I'm very excited to read it. I encourage you all to buy it. I guarantee it's well worth your money. And then another one of my friends is a therapist in Pittsburgh. So if you're thinking about, as folks who are interested in this work, if you're thinking about a conversation related to specific race when we talk about culture, one of my friends, Dr. Una Henry, has developed a theory of self-concept and race, and she speaks so beautifully on this topic when it comes to that specific area of culture. So I wanted to lift that up before we begin today. So we're going to talk about cultural understanding, cultural bias, and provide some basic self-awareness throughout the presentation. Again, I invite you to be as engaged as you feel on this topic, but mostly I'll probably be talking at you. I also want to let you know, I am not the be-all, end-all, say-all, know-all on something as expansive and ever-changing as culture. And so anytime I do a presentation, I invite you to take the best and leave the rest. So if there are some things in this presentation that you're like, nah, this irritates my spirit, I don't like it, I don't like what she had to say, that's fine. I respect that. I don't believe myself to be in any area the person who knows everything about anything. I also invite you that if anyone does say to you they know everything about anything, to run very far in the other direction. So I think a healthy dose of humility is really good for all of us, not just when it comes to culture, but when it comes to really anything human. Because our lives are constantly changing and evolving, things are constantly changing and evolving. And so when you attend presentations like this, not just mine, but anyone's, really use your discernment. Take the best, leave the rest, take nothing. You can rest your eyes, whatever feels best for you today. But please don't think that I'm coming up in here and telling you everything that there is to know about anything in 1 hour. What this presentation is not, and what this intercultural work is not. is this is not about being woke. I don't even know if we're using that word anymore or what that word even means, but this isn't like a presentation about being woke or waking you up or whatever that is. This isn't my political agenda about any politics related to liberal or progressiveness or independence. This is not some sort of like agenda I'm pushing on you. I'm not trying to change who you are fundamentally. So I'm not trying to shame you, I'm not trying to change what you value or what's important to you. The very fascinating thing about culture, and the more aware we are about our culture, is those things can shift and change, and they might shift and change, but that has to be organic to your process, and I can't push that on you. This isn't asking you to change your religious beliefs or you changing mine. And again, I'm not coming up here with some personal, political, spiritual agenda. My agenda is always based in compassion. My intention, whether it's therapy or presentation, is always based in extending compassion for ourselves and other people. So then, okay, why are we doing this work? Because that's so much when you are exposed to this work in the media, those are the things that people are pushing. Because culture work makes us more resilient. It makes us less defensive. It makes us better able to be innovative because multiple people can come to the table and have different perspectives, and those perspectives are valued and heard. It makes us less lonely because we can show up authentically who we are, as we are, and know that we belong. So culture work is really important because it involves all of us. So oftentimes when we think about culture work, we tend to think, like I said, about certain cultural groups. Well, this work isn't about me. This work is about you. This is about who you are authentically, how you show up in spaces. Do you feel like you belong? Another word when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we could use belonging. And belonging is inherent in our needs as mammals, as humans. We need to feel like we belong, and not me cutting off parts of myself to belong. That I need to be able to show up in who I am and how I show up culturally and know that that's welcome. And when we do that, when leaders do that and organizations do that, organizations thrive. They thrive because better decisions, more inclusive decisions get made, more voices are heard. So this isn't about shaming one group or another group.
Sorry about that.
Is it not working again? Okay. I can't tell. So I think it's really important that this work is about expanding our worldview and not about shaming you as an individual. And understanding that when leaders embody cultural awareness, they are really inviting their employees to show up as their whole, honest selves to the workplace. Because we had this really archaic notion of lead work at work and home at home, and there obviously we need to have healthy boundaries, but that idea that I can't show up in all of my humanness to work doesn't create an environment where I feel safe, where I feel able to communicate what I'm thinking, ideas I have, challenges I have, and that creates stifled work environments. And so one other reason I'm gonna let it go. I'm gonna let go. I appreciate you though.
Your voice carries well, so sorry about that.
Another reason I'm really deeply invested in cultural equity work is that we're lonely. We are lonelier, and this was 2004, so this was a long time before the pandemic, but we are lonelier than we've ever been. And with the pandemic, this has only exacerbated that. And so when we're so defensive, when we're so cut off, when we're so reactive, that only increases our loneliness. And loneliness is a higher indicator of mortality than smoking and food habits and drinking habits combined. Loneliness is a worldwide epidemic. So when we talk about things like working from home, we want to be flexible with that, of course, and we want to consider when we're working with individuals how well connected we are and they are. Because loneliness is an epidemic. And when we're scared of each other, when we feel like we can't show up authentically, we can feel lonely in a room full of people. So if I feel like I can't show up authentically, and I've known Kevin a long time, if I feel like I can't show up authentically with Kevin, even though I work with him, I'm still going to be lonely around him. There's a lot of clients I work with who are married who feel lonely in their marriages. And so one of the big important parts of emotional intelligence and culture work is being able to understand, who am I authentically? How do I show up so that I am not so lonely? Because our bodies get sick when we're disconnected from one another. So emotional intelligence is an expansive topic. We're not going to go this again, we have another 45 minutes. There's no possible way we can get into the depth and breadth of this. I encourage you, if you are in leadership positions, to explore this concept much more deeply. For the purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on self-awareness and empathy. But emotional intelligence accounts for upwards of 70% of success as leaders. So what does that mean? Like I said to you, Dr. Johnson, I respect your title, and it's very important to respect that. But if we do not have the emotionally intelligent skills, you will burn out, and your employees will burn out, and it'll be a toxic work environment. So the skills and tools are important. I do not want to diminish the education, because goodness knows my student loan debt isn't letting me forget the amount of letters behind my name, right? And so I am very much owning my letters because they own me, right? But that is not enough for me to rest on professionally and say, well, I did the work. That we constantly have to be working on ourselves, understanding that self-awareness piece is really hard for us. That's probably one of the hardest pieces of emotional intelligence. And that's one of the pieces that we disregard the most. And we tend to, and I mean this with love, overestimate our emotional intelligence. So what does that look like? When leaders say, I am empathetic, I do take care of my staff, I do listen to them, and I say, how well do you listen to yourself? How well are you taking care of yourself? What are your boundaries? How often are you taking time off? And when you take time off, are you taking time off? Because, as I have in an upcoming slide, we can only meet people where we've met ourselves. So if you are not showing up for yourself in empathetic and compassionate ways, I mean this with love, you aren't doing it for your teams. Because, one, your team sees what you do, and behavior is the most honest form of communication. So if I'm saying to you, take that time off, and you haven't seen me take a day off or a week off in months, you don't believe me. If I am criticizing myself and hard on myself in front of you, how much do you trust that I'm not doing it to you? And so when leaders say, no, I'm really good to everyone, I'm super empathetic, I'm super understanding, I listen to my teams, but then I ask them about it. Well, it's not about me. This is absolutely about you. The work always starts from the inside and moves out, because at the end of every presentation, folks will come up to me and say, how do I get my sister to go to therapy? Are you in therapy? No. Okay, well, we don't want to talk about that then, do we? So those kinds of conversations around, where is your self-awareness, and where are you in terms of your compassion and empathy and understanding for yourself? And if you aren't doing that work, you are not showing up in the best way for your team. As much as you think you are, I'm saying this with love for you, you're not. And so these are all the reasons, and I can explore them more at a later date, but emotional intelligence creates healthy work environments where people feel safe. When people feel safe, they stay even if the money isn't everything. I mean, money's something. It's inflation. Money's something. But if you offer someone another job for a little bit, there's numbers in there that I don't have memorized, for a little bit more money, but they feel safe and secure and seen and heard in their environment, they will stay. And they will show up for you in all these wonderful ways if you are able to do that for them. So again, a key part of this entire presentation, because when we talk about culture, we tend to think, well, I need Kevin to work on his culture at work. I need you to work, okay, well, where are you in your work? We have to start from the inside and work our way out. So as I go through this presentation today, this is an invitation to start inside and work your way out. So what is culture? So from the anthropological standpoint of culture, culture is our beliefs, our values, our practices, the ways in which we move through the world, and every single one of us has culture. So when this word has come up in, again, different spaces and places, people who look like me tend to be like, well, I don't have culture. That's not true. I have culture. Culture is my beliefs, my values, the car I drive, the way the music I listen to. We all have culture, which impacts how we show up in the world. And so, hey, Amika, you remember this one. This is the culture wheel. It's a big thing used at Bronson. I hijacked it for my personal purposes. Because I think what it does so well, and I can't find something similar, is that it captures the comprehensive, complex nature of culture. So when we think about my own culture, I'm an introvert, and after the pandemic, I developed a little bit of agoraphobia, being completely honest. Like, going into places has been an adjustment to me again. And so if you invite me out, as you sometimes do, you know I'm gonna say no 90% of the time. Like, and it doesn't mean I don't love you. It's just, I like a book better than people, right? So if you don't understand that about me, you might think I'm abandoning or rejecting you. Right? So like, first, that self-awareness piece, so that I can own that and communicate that to the people in my world, that most of the time I'm gonna want to stay home. I need to get out there because it can't be lonely, but most of the time I'm gonna want to stay home. Even though I public speak and I'm a therapist, people can drain me and I need recharging. Then you think of the green circle, and that's race, age, ethnicity, gender identity. These are parts of us that are part of our identity that can't be changed. And that's where stereotypes hang out. So when we think about culture work and we only focus on the green, we're diminishing all the other parts of who that person is. So when someone is white or someone is black, they are not just those things, although those are a big part of who they are and they get to say that. But we don't want to diminish that person into the stereotypes of just that circle. And that's what a lot of DEI work can do, and that can perpetuate stereotypes in the workplace. Because we want to think of someone from complex, multi-layered, and it's called in culture work intersectionality. Then you think of the yellow dimension, marital status, the red dimension. Like, I often talk about when I worked at HelpNet, as compared to when I worked in the executive offices, I could go into the HelpNet office and be like, all right, Alicia, I'm struggling, this is going on with my dad, and she's like, okay, listen, let's talk about it. Then I go and work that's the culture. I've been a therapist for at that point, I've been a therapist a really long time, so that's what I was used to in a work environment. I go into the executive offices, I'm like, hey, blah, 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 this is going on. And they're like, oh, And so then I would be like, oh, whoa. The culture in this part of the organization, same organization, huge organization, the culture of that type of work in leadership or in executive leadership was not what I was used to. And so I was betraying the values, the norms, the behaviors, and I didn't realize it because I had never been a part of that cultural group before. I'd been a part of therapy culture before. And then we think about things like the pandemic and what we've lived through and how all of that impacts us. So what often happens when we're talking about our culture is I can tell your culture because you're judging mine. Oh, you drive a Prius? Oh, that doesn't go very fast, does it? You're not in a rush. You know? Or I grew up in northern Michigan and have very rural cultural background, so like, oh, does the person need another pickup? Or like, how many dead deer do you need at the dinner table? You know, like, the way that we can often explore our own culture is by the way you're judging somebody else's. So, what are they wearing? Or, did you see their hair? And you're telling me everything about you in that moment, which is really hard when you're on the other end of that, right? When someone is like, oh, why would you dress that way? Since I moved into private practice, I have 40 pairs of black leggings and sweaters, and that's all I wear. And this is as dressed up as I'll be all month. Like, and I'm gonna get back in those leggings before I see my clients this afternoon because I can't function like this. But like, that might not be professional enough for you, right? Like, leggings aren't professional, and I'm not to say they're not, but when you are judging other people, that is an opportunity for you to explore what you're telling the world about yourself. I would never do that, I would never say that, I would never act that way, I'd never dress that way, those are ways that you are communicating your culture without even being aware that you're doing it. Because you are making a belief statement, this is right and that is wrong, this is good, this is bad, this is what professional is, this is what professional is not. And so, depending on my clients, I have been known to cuss. Depending. Is that professional? Depends. But some people, absolutely not. This is not okay. So like, really just understanding your belief system, your value, where your rubs are, that's your culture and beliefs, and you owe it to yourself to explore those. What are they? How did you get to that place? And you'll be able to tell because you're judging. Just watch TV, scroll Facebook, you're telling the truth about who you are. So one of the challenges that happens, and we do this, and I invite you to explore this with Mika and Dr. Johnson, there's this intercultural continuum that like you assess as an organization where you are in terms of your cultural awareness. And one of the challenges that most organizations have is they exist in what's called minimization. And the hallmark of minimization is conflict avoidance. Healthy couples have conflict. Healthy families have conflict. Healthy organizations have conflict. If you don't have conflict, someone is lying, someone is leaving. And you aren't going to know why. Because they never told you, because they didn't feel safe enough to tell you, or you didn't hear them, or they weren't listening. So I often say, and Alicia has heard me say this a million times, if someone stopped complaining to you, it's because they stopped trusting you. And so as leaders, when you're like, I haven't heard from Kevin in a long time, or I haven't, and you should go ask what's going on. Because just because someone stopped complaining, because we have such a whole hyper-focus on happy equals healthy, happy does not equal healthy, happy does not equal healthy, happy does not equal healthy. I can't say that enough, it doesn't. But we're so hyper-focused on that when someone isn't happy, there's something wrong with them, not the situation. So when we don't invite healthy conflict into organizations, we end up with high turnover, we end up with resentment, we end up with FMLA, which is the dreaded leader letters, right? Like, I once did a presentation, they're like, don't even say it out loud, like I was gonna manifest it. Like, you're somehow gonna like bring it into existence by saying it. But because so many of us never learned in our family situations or even the media how to have healthy conflict, so we just avoid it. And then you avoid yourself right out of your marriage, you avoid yourself right out of your relationships with your kids, you avoid yourself right out of a job. So having different perspectives is good. How you communicate that matters. But when you don't know how to do that, that creates a very unhealthy work environment. And this conflict has become a scary word because conflict does not mean abuse. Conflict does not mean like you get to talk to me in horrible, angry, mean ways. Conflict is your opinion, help me understand that, which we'll talk more about how to do that. I've been talking a lot for the last 30 minutes. I need some water. I know we're recording. Does anyone have any questions, ideas, concerns, frustrations, or anything you want me to elaborate on? I told you recording. Okay. Please.
It's not what you're wanting, but is there a way we can get a copy of your slideshow?
I will send it to Heidi, and then I will trust Heidi to disperse of it as appropriate. Does that work for you, Heidi?
Works for me.
Okay.
Thank you. It's really good.
Thank you. Mr. Baker.
Well, I have a question. Get out of my head. So, why do you think we have this continuum? You talked a little bit about, not wanting to go there for personal, but I like this thing that you have there about the artificial harmony.
Mm-hmm.
You see that so much in organizational structures where, it's kind of that duck kind of thing where everything's just floating nicely, but underneath their feet are going like this. I wonder if you could speak to some of the impact of having an organization built on this concept of artificial harmony.
So artificial harmony, also known to those who have done the IBI, is minimization. So artificial harmony is toxic positivity. It's this idea that I will only belong, and this is straight from most of our childhood. I will only belong if I present in a certain way. So if I come to you with a frustration or complaint, I'm not going to be heard, seen, valued, or listened to. So I'm going to cut off those parts of myself. I'm going to diminish those parts of myself. I'm going to betray those parts of myself because I need a job and I need money. And that's true. Like, those are facts. Those are facts. And so I'm going to do that, but I am going to quiet quit. I am going to show up as little as I possibly can. I am going to burn out. I'm going to get physically ill. Like, those things are what happens when we are told that you are only acceptable if you show up with this attitude, this belief, this way of being. That is not, because I do this presentation and inevitably we go to extremes. Well, what about that person that only complains, that only does this? Yes, that is not healthy either, right? When someone is consistently just always dogging this everything and saying this is awful, this is bad, this is horrible, right. I'm not saying that is when we think of we polarize and we're like, well, she's giving permission for everyone to just complain all the time. No, it's not what I'm saying. But when I come to you, and this is usually very early in a relationship, so early in my tenure as an employee, early in my relationship with a partner, when I come to you and I say, hey, this attendance policy or me getting here at this time, this is really hard. Can we talk about this? And you're like, that's just the way it is. Okay. Or this dress code, right? I remember the first time I wore Jordans, I took a picture and sent them to my friends to my job because I was like, wow, I'm great. I got my, with leggings, I was like, I got my J's on, I got my sweater, I got my leggings. I felt comfortable, I felt like who I was. And I thought, this dress code stuff is ridiculous, right? So if I come to you and I say, hey, can we talk about this dress code and what you think professionalism is? It just is what it is. We need our customers, our patients to see us in a certain way, blah, 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 blah. Okay. I need a job, need to pay my bills, and I'm going to do what I got to do. And that's it. I'm not going to do more. I'm not going to tell you the truth again because now we don't have trust. And it's not, and the answer isn't, because leaders will say, well, I can't do anything about it. But you didn't even listen. You didn't even listen. That's just the way, it's like when we were kids. It's just the rule. It's just the way it is. You didn't even listen. And to try to understand where this person was coming from. I have tattoos. Does that make me somehow less professional? And I understand from maybe your cultural belief that might never be something you want to do. But why do you get to judge me and tell me that that's not professional? Why are you setting the standard? Who did that? But no one wants to have those questions, so it's just the way it is. When I say I am legitimately still professional when I have my J's on and my tattoos are this does not mean I am any less who I am. Yes, it does. Then you start asking people to cut off parts of themselves. And then you create artificial harmony because I need a job. I'm also looking for another job. I'm also reading a ton of stuff I shouldn't be reading on the job. I'm also watching Netflix while I should be working. And I'm not excusing that behavior, but what you told me in that interaction, those micro moments where I try to connect, is how you feel doesn't matter. So my hook, my connection to the job is now diminished. So I'm not saying quiet quitting is right. People will get on me about this at the end of the presentation. I'm not excusing, I'm explaining. Those are two different things. But if I come to you early and I'm excited about this job, and the responses I'm getting are is this the way we do it? I immediately feel, you can see it in people. Just within the first year, they're just the color in their face, where they're just all right. If you don't offer opportunities for someone to grow, to challenge themselves, Like, you're gonna see that great resignation. And of course the great resignation happened. We were facing death in a very real way. A million people, I mean, some people don't believe it, 1 million people died. That creates a little bit of an existential crisis. We were locked in our homes. That creates a little bit of an existential crisis for people. Whether or not you believe the whole thing was happening, you're still facing an existential crisis because of the government. So, yeah, you have mass resignation. Your values are coming into alignment. You might not be conscious that's what was happening, but as therapists, we saw that coming from miles away. Like, that idea of I'm spending my life in this place doing this and not feeling valued is going to come into the forefront when we're faced with things like mortality or being locked in our house or things like the vaccine. Like, that is going to come into very clear view. Thank you for asking that. So then how do we keep these conversations? How do we have healthy conflict? So oftentimes I invite people, they're called touchstones, to when you have these in a workplace, and these again are not the be-all, end-all touchstones. You can use them, you cannot use them, but you should have them to guide conflict in a workplace. So you should have some template for how you guide conflict in a workplace so people know what to do. When things get difficult, turn to wonder. I wonder why I'm feeling the way I feel. I wonder why they're reacting the way they're reacting. I wonder why that's so important to them. I wonder why this is so important to me. So that self-awareness piece, when you're confronted with these challenges, pause and ask yourself, why am I responding this way? And this is something I invite couples to do. I invite people to do with their children. Pause. I wonder. Because we just go, how I feel is right. I'm doing the right thing. Everyone else is wrong. Like, or I'm doing everything wrong, everyone else is right. So just inviting wonder into your conversation, it makes it so much more roomier, that humility, right? Humility and compassion. Humility and need to do that we can do that can take away that inherent goodness. Some people need to be locked up. Keep us safe. But when we start, because when we get rid of this, we dehumanize folks. When we divorce this from the humanity of any individual, we divorce it from ourselves. Maya Angelou has this beautiful quote, there is nothing human that is foreign to me. And this might not be a popular thing, but I'm tend not to be very popular with these conversations. One of my biggest grinds on this is when there's a shooting and someone goes, evil came to this town. Maybe true, but what we have done there is then wiped our hands from the situation. We have now decided this was just an evil exception to the human rule, and we have no responsibility for how this became this. So when we do that, we dehumanize someone. We are divorcing ourselves from responsibility as to how our culture ended up this way. Also, no fixing, saving, and advising. If, as a leader, people come to you and you are jumping right into fixing it before they've even finished talking, people are not feeling heard. Most of the time, people just need to be listened to and listen to more and listen to more and listen to more. Research indicates we can only listen for about 4 seconds. So, this is what I'm talking about when we talk about self-awareness. It's like I'm very empathic. And I'm like, right, but then Mika goes to you and says, hey, I'm thinking about, and she's automatic, or her boss is automatically problem solving, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. You should have done it this way. You go home and you say, hey, this happened at work, and your partner is like, you should have done it this way, you should have done it. There's a lack of empathy in that. There also says, I don't trust you. So when you come to me with a problem and I start fixing, saving, and advising, what you hear is I don't trust you. And we feel that. And it makes us insecure in ourselves and our ability to trust ourselves. We ask for consent. You ask for consent. If someone comes to you and they're saying, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, are you looking for a solution? How can I best support you? What are you needing? As a therapist, I do not give advice because I don't want you to come back and be like, I got divorced because of you. I'm not going to do it. So I do not give advice because I trust you. I want to be, if I'm the only person in the world that trusts you, I want to be that person. And the minute we jump in and start fixing, saving, advising, we're telling people we don't trust them and that they should trust us more. Now there's collaboration, right? I've listened to you, I've said, hey, what do you need from me? And they're like, I need your advice. Now I have an entry point. But you have invited me in. And that says, I'm still trusting you, right? Like you've asked for this from me, I'm giving it to you. I didn't just jump in because I'm so uncomfortable with like, conflict and feeling bad and I want to make it better. Most of the time, just listen. As partners, leaders, parents, friends, just listen, and listen some more, and keep listening. And then sometimes if you're done listening, set a boundary and go to bed. You don't have to listen all the time. But most leaders can do a much better job just listening. And listen their way right out of the problem being a problem. A lot of times, people will just talk themselves right through it, and they'll thank you. And they're like, I didn't do anything. But they just needed a place to process. Now, again, of course, you need healthy boundaries. You're not the therapist. Sometimes people are, have traumatic situations. They need extra support. I'm not saying that that's your job and it's not your job. But a lot of times people just need to be heard. And we don't give them that opportunity because we're jumping in, fixing, saving, advising. Honor feeling as much as knowing. We are a highly over-intellectualized culture. Feelings are clues. Feelings are clues. They're really important. Happy doesn't equal healthy. And so we have made this toxic positivity, happiness culture because it makes you want to buy things. It's consumer-based. I'm miserable, so I need a new car. I'm miserable, so I need a new dress. I'm miserable. So it's a function of the economy. This happy thing is a function of an economy. It's not a function of how human beings actually are. So what does that mean? When anger comes up, I need to pay attention to it like a clue. So anger says this is a boundary violation. Anger doesn't mean I get to be mean to you, like right? Behavior, emotion, different, sadness. So when we do that, again, we can only meet people as much as we've met ourselves. So if I come to Alicia or Kevin and I'm struggling with grief or I'm struggling and they shut down, they're telling me they don't have a relationship with their grief. And so I can say, all right, I'm going to stop going to the hardware store for milk. Because what we can do is say, if we don't understand that, we'll be like, well, there's something wrong with my grief. There's something wrong with my sadness. I shouldn't be angry. Instead of like, oh, you don't get anger. Okay, can't go to you with anger. You ain't got a place for that. Your face. You want to ask a question? Oh, I thought you had like a quizzical look. Sorry. But like, maybe I just like your glasses. But like, that often happens where we'll go to somebody with our sadness, our frustration, our grief, our anger, and they can't meet us there. And they'll say, you're too blessed to be stressed, or get over it, or it's not that big of a deal, or calm down. And then we take that internally instead of like, oh, no. You don't get it because you haven't done the work. There's nothing wrong with your emotional world. You're not too much, too sensitive. But a lot of times in the dominant cultural narrative, you aren't allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to be frustrated. You're not allowed to not like something. Or you're not grateful. Or you should just be positive. Or think of a positive spin on it. So really, we have to have a balance between the intellectual in this culture and the feeling in this culture. So how does that come into practice in conflict in an organization? That when someone comes to you and they're angry, it's okay that they're angry. They don't get to be mean. They don't get to call you names. They don't get to denigrate you in any way. They don't get to like attack your identity. But they can say, I'm really angry, or I'm really frustrated. And don't try to make them feel better. That's not the healthy solution in that moment. And if you're not saying, I don't know, like a million times a day, I don't trust you. So, oftentimes clients will ask themselves, I don't know. 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 And getting comfortable with that. You don't have to know. It's impossible for you to know. Sometimes you know, most of the time you don't know. I don't know. And people actually trust you more when you do that. There's something really comforting about someone who says, I don't know. Because like most of the time you probably don't know either, but I just said it out loud. Like, oh, finally, someone said they don't know. Does anyone know? Nobody knows. I worked in cancer care in my early 20s. I did a psycho-oncology rotation. It was just life-changing for me. And like these people at the end, some of them were in their 40s where I am now, but like some of them were in their 80s and 90s. And I remember them telling me like, no one knows anything. This has been such a wild ride. I never figured out anything. There's no such thing as a miracle. And I was like, wow. I just felt so relieved. I was like, they're at the end of their life, and some people had an okay relationship with that being at the end of their life. And I just remember being this young therapist and feeling like I had to know. And they would be like, oh, darling, no one ever knew. And I was like, oh, yay! No one ever knew. And it just really let me off the hook in this genuine way of like, none of us had this figured out, and like allowing the people who work with you and work around you to know that about you is so liberating. And they'll trust you more because you're being honest. Like, I don't know the right answer to this, or I don't know. What do you think? What do you think? I don't know. It's your idea. And let yourself off the hook because you're pretending anyway. Like, I know you are. So we're kind of running out of time, and I want to invite an opportunity. I'm pretty overambitious with my presentation, but I want to invite an opportunity to pause the recording.